So what is our timeline for this, for your presentation? Trish, do you know?
I don't have a timeline. Shin can go for as long as he needs or as long as we need him.
Oh, okay. Do you have an estimate of time, Shin?
No, realistically, if I go through the history, which is quite voluminous, we are probably looking at a solid hour.
Okay.
You heard okay?
I believe with our new board members, and not everyone has been on the committee hearing it. So what do you guys think is a solid hour? You hang in there?
I can do that.
Okay.
We're missing the best inaugural concert ever.
I'm DVRing it.
It's all A-list entertainers. So
Oh dear. We are dedicated.
Record the
the
inauguration
sacrifice
concert.
we make, huh? Yeah.
Okay, so well, let's get going, Shan. We'll get through
Susan's
the hour.
the best inauguration concert.
I'm not a star A-list entertainer. I apologize. Can everyone hear me okay? I just want to make sure my audio quality is okay.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. Then with no further ado, I will take my 5 pages of bullet points here and begin to sort of go through a conversation. I'd like to take you through some history with respect to the facilities projects of the district, which will take us to sort of where we stand today. Discuss with you some of the latest conversations we've had with the state, which I think is an important player, and I'll give a little more definition of the state here in a moment. And then talk about some internal discussion and planning that's occurred with your team, myself, other members of that team, and the administration. And then our proposed plan of action is kind of what I'll close out with. So within that framework, I first of all apologize for not having a nice PowerPoint to put up on screen for you all to look at. But there's a lot of stuff here, and it would make for a very long PowerPoint, including some stuff that I think we want to discuss before we put words to paper and circulate it out that others can take a look at. So with no further ado, let me get into the history. Back in 2008, some 12 plus years ago now, the district approved a general obligation bond with the intent of proceeding on some facility modernization projects. Upon commencing with those projects, it was discovered that there were mold issues within many of the buildings in the district. Those mold issues ended up, on their initial face look, ended up that they would probably require far more money than what the bond that was approved and what the state funding sources for school facility projects might provide. In other words, we knew that we were going to have more need than there were resources available. As a result, the district issued a certificate of participation. And a certificate of participation is essentially debt which is backed by your general fund, your operating fund, Fund 01, the one which you budget every year. And those COPs were issued in July of 2014 in the amount of $4.5 million to provide funding for facilities projects and mold remediation projects. The district went on to sought and was awarded matching funds for those projects from the School Facilities Program, which is how the state provides funding from the statewide school bond for school facilities. It's basically a grant mechanism where you apply, and under normal circumstances, it's roughly a 50-50 match. You provide half the money, the state provides half the money, and in theory, that's enough to get most projects done. But I would point out that the state aid or the school facility program utilizes estimates of funding based upon actual state projections, not the real cost of construction that you incur. So the state may take its analysis and say, yes, on average, it costs $100,000 to build a classroom. District, you provide 50, we provide 50. There you go. You have enough money. Go ahead and proceed with your project. But the reality of the situation in your part of the world is that what costs $100,000 in many other parts of the state often costs significantly more. That is a function of your remote location and the reality that there are not a lot of large urban centers nearby close to you where supplies and the type of construction workers you would need could be found. So it is not uncommon in your part of the world for projects to run 125 to 150% more than the statewide averages. So you had these state aid money, you had this COP, but at that time, back in 2014, the state actually had run out of money in the school facilities program. They were awaiting the approval of a new statewide bond at that time. And so basically what you got from the state was not cash in hand, but an IOU. This is roughly taking us to 2016. And because the state funding was impaired at that time, 2014, because the state funding was impaired at that time and really didn't flow again until 2017-18, something had to be done to provide the cash that the state would otherwise have provided. And so in 2016, specifically in February of 2016, the district issued a second certificate of participation, or COP. Again, that's the general fund backed debt. This time it was issued in the amount of $11.285 million. And so that puts you with roughly $4.5 million from the first COP and $11.3 million from a second COP. Unfortunately, that second COP issued in 2016 for $11.3 million utilized a resolution which basically said that the COP was an advance of state matching funds. This is a very important point because this gets us into a lot of confusion that ensued with the state subsequent to the issuance of that COP. With the COP issued, the district having some general obligation bonds outstanding, and knowing that costs were exceeding the resources that the district could raise, the district decided to enhance its state funding by entering something called the Hardship Program. The Hardship Program is part of the school facility program that the state normally uses, but it differs in that when you are in hardship, essentially you are saying that you don't have local resources sufficient to complete the projects at hand, and therefore the state will provide you with 100% of the costs based upon the state's determined average costs for basic facilities. So when you're in hardship, it can build core infrastructure like classrooms, occasionally multi-purpose rooms, but it oftentimes does not fund things such as fields, equipment, or other accoutrements that you would normally associate with having in your standard classroom. It's sort of the stripped down bare bones version that they fund. So you do get more money and you do eliminate the need to provide local matching funds by being in hardship. And that is sort of why the district pursued that. In June of 2016, the district also sought out and was approved for a second general obligation bond authorizing an additional $6.5 million in GEO bonds. That GEO bond debt is paid by your taxpayers. It differs from the COP, which is paid by your general fund. And so you have these additional resources, and relatively promptly in February of 2017, that new general obligation bond authorization saw its first issuance in the amount of about $3.2 million. And the $3.2 million that were issued in February of 2017 were applied to repay a COP. They were applied to repay the 2015 COP, the first COP which was issued. Took that COP from about $4 million and change down to about $1.4 million remaining outstanding. Unfortunately, that 2015 COP was not of a concern to the state. So you had some resources, you applied them to a COP, but it wasn't the COP that the state later said it had issue with. In fact, at roughly the same time, about a week or so after you had priced but not yet closed the issuance of those GO bonds to repay the 2015 COP, the state sent a letter to the district indicating that it would need to fully repay the 2016 COP. And that determination was essentially made because the 2016 COP was approved with that resolution saying that it was an advancement of state funding. And so here you are, you had some resources, you applied them to a COP, and shortly after applying them to the COP, the state said, no, we need the other COP paid off. That created some confusion at the state level, but a fundamental reality was very clear at that point in time, which was that all of your projects were costing 125 to 150% more than what the state was providing and what estimates had indicated. And so despite being in hardship, the district had to continue in order to complete projects to provide additional funding. And in the course of doing that, you guys had spent basically the entirety of all the COPs that were issued, as well as started utilizing general fund resources to make up the difference between what the state provided and the actual cost of these projects. That reality creates an issue where we did not have the resources available to repay the 2016 COP as the state had requested. And so it placed the district in a bit of a catch-22. Here you are having to repay roughly $11.3 million in COPs that were issued in 2016, but you also have to complete the projects in order to be eligible to receive the hardship funding from the school facility program from the state. There was enough resources to do one of the two, but not both. And so because the projects were underway and because it was important to get the state school facility program monies, the district opted to go ahead and continue with the projects and forego repaying the COP. In fact, at one point in time, there was a letter from the state indicating that they would generally be okay with that idea, understanding that the district had multiple phases of projects to come in the future still. And still back in the early 2017 timeframe. However, later in 2017, going into 2018, while the district was trying to explain this situation to the state to no avail, the state eventually decided to threaten a material inaccuracy finding with respect to the district's activities with the school facility program. And what a material inaccuracy finding would have resulted in is a requirement for the district to repay the state in an amount equal to the 2016 COPs, roughly $11.3 million, and that the state would determine that the 2016 COPs were no longer an advancement of their funding, but rather a district contribution or a local contribution to projects. This would also leave the 2016 COPs outstanding. So if they had gone through with this, the district would have had to, in theory, cut a check for roughly $11.2 million to the state immediately, and then also over time repay that same $11.2 million in the COPs which it had outstanding from 2016. Also, if the material inaccuracy finding went forward, it would make the district ineligible for future participation in the school facilities program for a period of years. Sort of a worst of all worlds. Usually material inaccuracy findings are limited to bad actors who knowingly and willfully lie on their applications for the school facility program in order to garner more money. That was not the case with Klamath Trinity. This was merely a case of projects costing more than the actual funding provided by the state, and the district using its own resources to make up those shortfalls in order to ensure that projects were completed, which is a requirement of the school facility program. So here we are with insufficient resources, more expenditures required than we have funds for, and the state threatening to seek to claw back money from the district, which the district does not have. At the point in time of initially discussing this, and this is when my firm, East Shore, basically was brought into the fold, our initial analysis indicated that if the material accuracy finding went forward, the district would ostensibly be underwater and need to be taken over by the state almost immediately. So we had some more conversations with the state to stave off that less than favorable prospect. And in those conversations, we presented to the state every viable option that we could think of to assist in repayment of the 2016 COPs to satisfy their request. This included ideas like tendering of the bonds, which is where we go in and we basically find another source of funds to replace bonds with the 2016 COPs by approaching the owners and asking them to allow us to buy them out. Unfortunately, that was not viable because, oddly enough, your small amount of 2016 COPs, about 11.3 million, are held by more than 10 or so owners, and it's very difficult because you have to get 100% of the owners to agree to be tendered. It's just something we could not get all of the owners to agree to. We proposed to the state that we could refinance the 2016 COP and replace it with a new debt issuance. The state rejected that option out of hand, and so that went away. We sought to repurpose the proceeds of the GEO bonds, which were issued in 2016, to repay the 2015 COPs, and instead use those funds for the 2016 COP, roughly $3 million, because it had just occurred at that point in time, and there were still funds sitting in a bank account that we could access from that GEO issuance that was going to repay the 15 COP. However, to do that, we again needed the agreement of the owners of both the GEO bonds and the 2015 COPs, that being some 13 or 14 odd owners. And again, we're not able to get all the owners in agreement. We also told them that we would seek grants and other funding sources that might be able to be applied to the projects to mitigate the district's amount of COP or amount of encroachment, thereby freeing up funds to repay more 2016 COP. And the state accepted all that information. We went off on our way and started trying to execute the various plans, including the issuance of the remaining authorized but not yet issued GEO bonds of the district. And of all of those options, the only one which we could really actualize was the GEO bond issuance. You had roughly $4.3 million in remaining authorized GEO bonds between the election of 2008 and the election of 2016. Those were issued in September of 2019. All of the proceeds from those GEO bonds went to repay roughly $4.3 million of your 2016 COPs, leaving us with right around $7 million of 2016 COP left. And then from there, we turned our focus to the final project, the iTech building, and tried to figure out how we could find a way to get sufficient resources to complete that project. Looking back to 2019, it was fairly clear that we were not going to be able to find sufficient resources without additional grant funds or other funding sources. And so the iTech building was placed on hold. All work on it was stopped. And we went into a holding pattern on completing the iTech building while we sought to try to figure out where we could find sufficient funding to complete the building. Additionally, we looked at how much that iTech building would cost. And we knew that the state would provide us roughly $3 million for the iTech building. We had a few $100,000 from insurance settlements that could be applied to the iTech building. But the cost estimates that we're looking at for the iTech building were something on the order between $8 and $12 million, far more than what we had in resources that we could make available from anything that we saw. And so for that reason, we sat on our hands for a little while and tried to figure out a better answer. But by virtue of repaying some of the 2016 COPs with the GEO bonds issued in September of 2019, we did have the material inaccuracy go away. The state removed their material inaccuracy finding. It was never heard by the state, and therefore that threat of having to pay them back immediately went away. However, we were informed that there would be the prospect of an audit finding when the projects were closed out, indicating that any local resources that were applied to the project would in theory offset what was provided by the Hardship Program and in turn need to be repaid to the state at some point in the future. based upon a calculation of where we were at that point in time, that would have been roughly $7 million, and they recently affirmed that that was the amount that would need to be rebated to the state. In other words, the amount of the 2016 COP that we were not able to pay off from other sources would be determined by the state to be a local contribution, and in turn negate roughly $7 million of hardship previously received, requiring the district to return roughly $7 million to the state. And the state said that that return of funds, once that audit was complete, could be repaid over a window of up to 5 years. We did some analysis and showed the state that a 5-year repayment window was too aggressive. This district really couldn't afford it, and therefore wanted to hold off on agreeing to that while we tried to find a better plan. That brings us to 2020, when efforts to figure out how to come up with this better plan that completes the iTech building and repays more of the 2016 COP became our primary focus. The district did apply for a grant in early 2020 for this iTech building. That was unsuccessful. They did apply again in the fall of 2020 and were successful. And that provided us with $3 million in additional resources specific to the iTech building. And so as we're looking at things and kind of looking at our accounts that we have available to us, specific to the iTech building, we now had roughly $3 million promised from the state from hardship funding, plus a $3 million grant, giving us $6 million for a project that, you know, in the best of cases, we estimate it will be $8 to $10 million to complete the iTech building. So we were still a few $1 million short, but making progress toward closing the gap. During the 2020 timeframe, there were some staff changes at the district. There were some changes in the construction team. There were some issues with the architect and the like that came to the fore. And so really during 2020, a lot of time was spent just kind of resetting the team, bringing new team members up to speed. Your then interim superintendent, as well as other members of the party, and sort of just keeping the state up to date as to the changes going on in the district. Once we get into late 2020, we're almost to the today time, we were able to proceed with a pathway that we think, you know, could probably get us home on the iTech building and maybe potentially make additional swipes at the 2016 COP. And this was really kind of developed in December of 2020. And at the very end of the year, with the grant approved, knowing that we had that resource for the iTech building, plus the $3 million, roughly $6 million in total, the team began to seek out new architects to update the design of the iTech, try to value engineer and get the cost of the project down to the resources that we have available, and also look for ways to potentially increase funding from the state, which the state recommended that we reapply for the project, allowing us to get a slightly higher grant amount based upon the current grant dollars versus what was approved a number of years ago. Also during that entire time frame, there was a new statewide school bond approved, and so there was again money in the school facilities program. You guys have received much of that state money, and there were also some appeals done of your prior hardship awards, which determined that you could be eligible for a little bit more money. And so roughly $1.7 million of additional funds from the state for prior projects in the iTech building were identified in that appeal process. So we have all of these different pieces, $3 million in a grant, $3 million in hardship, and let's call it roughly $2 million in prior appeals of awards that were due to the district. Some of that $2 million you have already received. It's been sent to the district, and you guys have used it to repay the general fund or pay off project invoices. But that being said, we were still a little short of the total amount needed for the iTech project, and also still not really having a great answer for how we could repay the $7 million of COPs from 2016 that the state found offensive by virtue of the resolution under which they were approved. That is the history kind of taking us to where we are today in a very, very short time frame. There's a lot more detail to that, a lot of sidebar discussions, a lot of this and that that was back and forth between all the parties. But needless to say, that synopsis, I think, gives you all the highlights and key important details. That takes us to where we are today. Any questions on the history before I proceed? Sal.
I have worked on a lot of construction projects in Indian country for public facilities using the HUD Indian Community Development Block Grant. It has not been my experience that construction costs are that far out of line with everyone else, at least when you're working on federally funded projects, because they're the estimates are based on Davis-Bacon wages, prevailing wage that, locally, construction firms don't normally pay that much, but in prevailing wage, we end up paying what you would pay in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But I've never seen cost overruns like that. I'm trying to figure out how the estimates were so low that the money put in place would end up millions and millions of dollars short of what it actually was going to cost. And it makes me wonder about the plans and specs and engineering estimates that were provided by the architect. It makes me wonder about the contractors who were awarded contracts. It just does not sound right to me. And I've worked for tribes. My entire tribe, the Karuk tribe, all of our buildings were built with grants with no debt attached. So I'm kind of having a hard time taking all this in.
Understood, and really that gets down to the fundamentals of school construction. School construction is dictated by state rules, which include the Department of State Architect, and have a lot more requirements because in California, our school sites are also built to serve as shelter in the event of emergency. And so the standards to which we build schools in California tend to be extremely high, requiring much more robust engineering, much more robust systems for roofing and the like, and also require certain ingress and egress requirements that you may be able to get around on the federal side. Also keep in mind that the estimates of project costs that we're comparing to are the school facility program estimates, which are the statewide estimates of what costs are. So it's not just Bay Area, they factor in a myriad of regions, which tend to draw the costs down in comparison to the higher cost one would see in urban areas or in rural areas where you don't have a lot of resources available nearby. As I was explained, a big piece of the increase in your costs for projects related to the reality that there was nowhere locally for workers to stay. And so when we talk about an 8-hour workday for your construction workers on these school projects, that included an hour of commute in, an hour of commute out, basically taking you down to 6-hour effective workdays on site. Add to that additional costs for the bringing in of materials and supplies, which generally, as I understood it, had to come in from either Eureka or from
Reading or Metro.
Reading and kind of areas around there, which is a long truck drive in, just again, increasing your costs for getting materials.
But what I'm saying is whoever estimated the costs would have figured that in, wouldn't they? I mean, and if the state is designing these buildings and the state is estimating the costs and then the state is funding the costs, it seems it seems really unfair to me that the state is way underestimating the costs and then way underfunding the construction. And what's the district supposed to do if the state created the problem all the way along the way and it just kept getting compounded?
And this is the catch-22 that I mentioned earlier. I can't speak to what the prior architects did in their estimation. I can't speak to what the prior construction team did. I'm on the finance side. I don't monitor, nor do I supervise the folks with the hammers and nails. I would tell you that it is my understanding that neither of those team members are part of the team anymore.
Was a lot of the cost overrun in the form of change orders?
Not as I understood it, no. I understood it was predominantly the differentials between, again, what the state provides you as the amount available and what needed to be done in terms of the actual construction itself. And those two
It seems to me like there would have been a way to demonstrate to the state that their estimates were far too low for this area and that adjustments needed to be made.
And one would hope that would be the case, but the state uses statewide estimates and they basically codify these into their operational rules. And so when you talk with folks at the school, at the Department of State Architect and the Office of Public School Construction who administer the school facilities program, they have a little chart. That chart says the grant amount is, and that's how much you get for the project. You can show them all the overruns in the world. There really is no process by which we can amend those amounts. The only thing that was done subsequently were appeals to adjust square footage determinations and things of that nature. And keep in mind, the state's estimates are derived on a per square foot of construction basis. So they basically take a peanut butter per square foot cost and apply it to the square footage of your building. That's how they determine how much money they will give you. It's not as if it's a true analysis of the project need, project cost, or what complexities may be involved in actually delivering a project.
Does state funding have to be used for school facilities?
In theory, no. You could build it yourself, but realistically, there are no other sources of funding. The general fund is provided with LCFF funding, which ostensibly goes to fund your operational purposes. There is no special grant per se within that LCFF funding for facility purposes. And so only to the extent that a district can and is willing to set aside its operational funding for the purpose of saving for future facility projects can you avoid any state funding. You can also use local bond funds if your community will approve them, which they did twice. And those funds were utilized, but realistically, because of the significant amount of federal land, which is within the district's boundaries, the amount of tax base you have as compared to the number of students in most other districts, it's relatively low. It's just one of those things where the fundamental realities of the lay of the land for Klamath Trinity present a bunch of complicating factors to this mechanism that the state uses of averages and funding for school construction.
Was there an exploration of corporate or private foundation contributions? In other words, you know, I've seen corporations offer matching grants where it's if you raise this part of the money for your project, we will match it. I'm just trying to think outside the box here because it seems like the district kind of got screwed by the state.
I don't disagree with you at all about that. That's been a common refrain over the number of years I've been coming up there, the last 3 or so, to discuss this matter. And what I would say is the district did pursue grants through other agencies. I'm not aware of any private foundations or private grants that were sought. But again, this is a set of cases where if you are aware of someone, I'd be happy to talk to them. We'd love to get more grant funds on the table if we can. But we have, as I understand it, kicked the tires on anything that would fit and would be eligible. And to the extent we had tried before and not been successful for certain grants, we did amend those applications and eventually were successful, which is part of the mix of funds that we have for the iTech building, roughly $3 million. For the other projects that precede the iTech, I'm not aware of any grants that were awarded. I know that there were some grants that were sought out, but none were successful.
And what about partnerships with either the tribe or College of the Redwoods? College of the Redwoods is prevented from teaching vocational training and, construction related, IT related. They use tribal facilities there and pay a decent amount of money, but they are constrained from teaching certain kinds of classes because the facilities don't exist in Hoopa. And so I'm wondering whether a partnership with them could be negotiated. They're also state funded, but
I would certainly love to have that conversation with them. It has not been contemplated since I have been involved with this, that I'm aware of. It's understanding that, the iTech building that we're going to seek to replace will have 3 sort of programs in it. And if any of those 3 programs can align to something that the college can find a way to provide additional funding, I think it would be a great resource to have. But that being said, I don't know how much they have or how much they can commit, or what resources or funds
what they'd want to know is how much it would increase enrollment, how much it would increase their revenue long-term to invest in such a building. So I don't know.
We can certainly go down that pathway to trying to solve the iTech.
Can you foresee
Hi.
a realistic opportunity for the district to dig its way out of this hole?
In the immediate term, not necessarily. Over time, yes.
And time is what, 10 years, 5 years?
We'd be talking about a 10-year plus time frame.
Okay.
Really.
I'm just wondering how the district is going to stay afloat in the meantime, because they're must be paying a lot of interest on debt right now.
We actually, we paid down some of the COP so that now that there's roughly $7 million of the 2016 remaining and 1.4 of the 2015 COP. For the current fiscal year, your interest expense is just over $300,000, about $310,000.
On $9 million?
Correct. We've structured, and I can send the sketch over in the future. If you don't mind, Priscilla, if I can get to Ms. Colgrove's question, she's been waiting patiently, and I'll get back to you thereafter.
Okay.
Ms. Colgrove, thank you.
Hi, so thank you. So we do construction, and we do construction on the reservation, and we've worked on school projects, not necessarily for the state, but within the early childhood buildings. And I would have to say that the costs are not so far off from other places where we would be looking at millions of dollars overages. I think that we have to be real when we have this discussion and say that this is terrible construction management. And then if we're going to take on other projects and we're talking about building another building, we really, as a governing board, need to be sure that our construction manager understands what he's doing or what she is doing. Because like I said, I'm really not buying this, that the cost is so different. So I think that I appreciate what you're doing, and I realize we can't go back, and we can't make different decisions, and we can't oversee the job. But as we move forward, we need to be frank and honest in this discussion and say, this is terrible construction management. We knew what the cost would be before we accepted those bids, right? We knew if they were overbid that we needed to go back and evaluate those projects.
And let me take a step back now, just to be 100% clear with everyone as to what it is I do in this process. I'm on the finance side of things. And the finance side.
Yes, I get it.
I did not select your prior construction team. I have my thoughts. I will reserve my thoughts as my own on that matter. This is a public meeting. I don't need to get into that here. What I would tell you is that as part of looking to move forward with the iTech, with the inception of your new superintendent coming on board, the prior team is gone. We are looking for a fresh approach and a fresh pathway with a new team, both the hard construction and the management thereof, as well as the architectural component. Again, looking to design things that are hopefully going to be more efficient, cheaper to deliver, and also hoping to get a team on board that can do a much better job of estimating costs, so that we do have some clarity that the resources available match the funds available, and there will be no further encroachment. Over the course of the years, it is my understanding, and I've looked at the numbers to verify this, that, you know, the cash that came in for projects as compared to the cash that was expended for projects have actually been in excess of $10 million beyond what you received. In other words, this has been a major hit to the district in its resources over the years that, you know, probably should not have gotten that far.
Yeah.
The time I got here, we were simply charged with trying to solve the material inaccuracy and avoid the state coming to claim $11 million immediately. That then morphed into us dealing with the issuance of the GEO bonds. All of this stuff, as I understand it, occurred once those projects were ostensibly complete in terms of the construction. We were mainly trying to clean up the finance and the accounting components thereafter. And
Yeah. So
to
I
a
mean,
good
I
And I
place.
appreciate that. And I'm not questioning your, I'm not questioning you at all. I just want to be frank in this discussion.
I
I would also like to add that this material inaccuracy, one of the issues was that our construction came in under what we received from the state in some sites and over in other sites due to various issues. And the district was looking at this as a whole pot of money. And the state says, no, if this school came in under what we gave you, we want that money back. And that was part of the material inaccuracy. And Shin was able to negotiate that and get rid of that. So
was it the same contractor and the same architect on all of the projects at all of the schools?
I believe so, although Laura Lee, you may know better than I.
well, I came on after a lot of this was already in place. We've had two architects. I'm not sure of the work that each one continued. They were on the whole, I believe they were on the whole project, but one architect, and then we brought in another one. I don't know all the details on.
So it doesn't make sense to me that if the state did all the cost estimates and, you know, was funding these projects, that some would come in costing less than they estimated and some would come in costing millions more.
Well, some of the things too is when you have a state architect and they come in and they say, no, we need this way, you have to do it. And so some of the change orders were at the direction of state architects.
And so
Unfortunately,
undo construction and redo it, or?
I believe it's additional scope of service that you had to incur to ameliorate the state's requirements. Unfortunately, local school districts, it's sort of as if you are the manager of these projects and the ultimate owner of these projects, but the actual construction sign-offs and check-offs on things being complete are all state-driven. And so it's sort of one of those things where you may want the walls to be a certain way, but the state insists it's another way. And in doing that, it tends to drive up costs. It's not an ideal mechanism by any stretch of the imagination. Your story is an allegory I give to many districts as they contemplate going into hardship as one of, things to watch out for and be aware of. You're not alone in this, although this is one of the worst cases of it I have seen. I have made the point to the state numerous times, although there is no checkbox or rule that they can apply to make this a reality, that it it would have been better for the state to draw a line much earlier
Really?
and forego allowing this district to get this deep in the mess that it is in. But the time I came on board, we already had a lot of this stuff in place. It was simply trying to recover, negate the material inaccuracy finding, and find a viable pathway to complete the remaining projects. I appreciate the fact that we put a pause on the projects. I appreciate the fact that we had a change in administration that has allowed us to reopen the construction examination for any future project and not have to use the same architect, not have to use the same construction manager, and hopefully through a robust RFP process, find a team that will do a better job in the future.
Was there grounds for accountability with the architect and the construction contractor? I mean, this must have been a bonded project.
As I understand it, there was a suit between the prior architect and the district. I'm not privy to all the details of the outcome of that suit, other than that at the end.
Oh, I meant the district suing them. I meant the other way, the district suing them, because it seems like the district was put in a no-win situation. They were really put in a double bind with no way out other than to get in a deeper hole. The whole thing somebody needed to bring it to a halt and take stock before it got tens of millions of dollars in the hole.
I would generally agree with you, and it's why I recommend to most of my clients, especially if they're entertaining participation in the hardship program, that they take it piece by piece. There are a myriad of details in here that I could get into as to where I think things got tripped up. Part of it was that it was a multi-phase project, originally contemplating 4 phases, consolidated into 3 phases, as I understand it. And in the process of that, some of the funds that were rolled over by the state allowed this deficit to grow beyond where it should have. I think ideally, if you had taken phase 1, stopped at the end of phase 1, you would have recognized that there was a problem. Then you could have dealt with that problem there. That was roughly $1 million problem, not a $10 million plus problem. And then as you rolled into phase 2, you probably would have been in a position where, similar to where we are today, we could have evaluated the shortfall and made a determination to either pause or not proceed. But also keep in mind that assumed with these projects was mold issues. At the time, there were closed campuses. We're playing the juggle of kids, moving kids from elementary campuses to high school campuses, from campus X to campus Y. It was not some small infringement on the ability of the district to operate in a sound and logical way that most others would. It created a myriad of consternation across a myriad of operational pathways.
And it also, because it was black mold, if we did not act, we were open to huge liability issues. So
That's what I mean. It turned into a real catch-22 for the district.
Agreed.
And nobody seemed to be looking at minimizing the loss. I mean, if you can't, if you can't,
well,
complete it.
Well, and you're stuck in a position where the question is, do you, and I see you, Ms. Colgrove, give me 1 second. You're stuck in a position where you have this money available, but you have to complete the project to get the money. But at the same time, it's not enough money to complete the project, but if you don't complete the project, you don't get the money. And so it's one of the things where, yeah, I would totally agree. I don't like any of the decisions. I've made this point numerous times to the state. And when I speak of the state, I'm really talking about those that administer the school facility program and are involved in material inaccuracy finding. And unfortunately, they're very regimented. They have their little book of procedures and rules, and you check the checkbox and go down to the next and check the checkbox. And there is no checkbox for these sorts of situations. That's the fundamental problem we run into.
Have the state agencies involved in this heard your presentation, heard your analysis?
Multiple times.
I'm just wondering how they expect the
Shin has, like you said, he was able to negotiate for the material inaccuracy to go away. The hardship
You're picking up, Ms. George.
We may have lost her. She'll
I'm
be
not sure what all you did.
I would just summarize, Ms. Brissell, that
Susan, am I out or?
we had numerous conversations with the state. Your prior superintendent made, I would guess, a monthly trip to Sacramento. We often joined him at the table across from the folks, trying to go over these details, trying to get all of this stuff figured out, trying to explain the issues. Again, unfortunately, in the hardship rubric, basically they look at it as a bunch of check boxes, and there was no checkbox for the set of circumstances which we found ourselves in. Again, I think the best thing that could have happened was drawing a line after phase one, taking a pause and reevaluating. However, because of the fact that you had school closures, kids at different campuses, it was determined to proceed with phase two. And into phase three, and the iTech building is what we would call the last component of phase three. We at one point in time thought that there would be an additional set of buildings that may also need remediation. That apparently is not the case now, based upon recent testing. So this was even a worse problem when we were talking with the state previously. But we have raised those concerns. There are numerous letters and the like, but the state has a checkbox, and if it's not checked, then they go down their procedure list to what do they do when it's not checked. It's not a flexible program, so to speak.
Yeah, it almost cries out for a higher level decision maker, you know,
And we'll get there to that conversation.
at the governor's office level.
And we'll get to that conversation in 1 second.
Okay.
If you may, Ms. Colgrove, if I can.
I just wanted to say that our facilities were built beautifully. They were rebuilt, and our kids have a new facility. And it's not likely that that would have happened if we didn't have this issue. So I know it looks bad, but you know, if we have to look at it as if we're paying back a debt in order to be able to have a classrooms that are healthy for our kids, that's how we have to look at it. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate what you've done, taking this on. But I like to be straight with things and make sure that we are all understanding what the issue was. So thank you.
I totally appreciate that. And believe me, this is not something that I don't see as an injustice. It's not something that I don't see as unfair to the Klamath Trinity Joint Unified School District. I make that point. Others have made that point. It may be making that point vociferously that resulted in the material inaccuracy finding. But that being said, the material inaccuracy finding was basically a death knell. And we did not want to go down that pathway. We instead opted to buy as much time as we could, seek to find alternative solutions. I have asked, but have been told do not ask again because they will not entertain it and they're not happy about hearing it. Given these facts, for some consideration for additional funding. There is no mechanism through the school facility program to do that. There may be some ability, as you had noted, by going to higher ups to get some understanding and acquiescence, but that would be part of our plan going forward because in my mind, and as it's been relayed to me by the lobbyists who you've retained, Capital Advisors Group, to help you out in this process, we are now in a place where we have exhausted all administrative avenues. We've told them the same story every way we can conceivably tell them. We've showed them every way that this was unfair. And their answer is, when do you want to repay the 2016 COP and how? There is nothing else that they are honestly concerned about. In all honesty, they could care less if the iTech building gets completed. One area of concern at the school facility program level is making the 2016 COP go away. With that, it eliminates any audit finding, any need to repay funds that were granted to the district previously. We believe it puts you in the best position going forward fiscally, given everything else short of a magical new source of funding to increase the pot and help replenish the encroachment from the past. I have argued for that before and been told, no, we have our state averages. This is the amount you get, just like every other school district. Live with it. It is what it is. I don't appreciate that answer, but I'm not going to continue to argue knowing that we're not going to get anywhere talking to the administrative staff. We now have to go to the next level up, which are electeds, governor's office, legislators from your region, and others who may have a vested interest. But that's part of a conversation that we'll get to here in a few minutes, if you don't mind. Having rehashed that history, taking a little longer than I would have wanted to, but totally understanding that many of you are new to the board and this is your first time hearing this, and there is a lot to unpack here. Hopefully that history is enough for now. I am 100% happy and perfectly fine with holding additional conversation with any individuals who want to go over all the letters, all the details. It is safe to say that the file that I maintain for this project is very large. It may be one of the largest files I have for any of my clients in all reality. So that being said, where are we today? There are no more questions on history. I'd like to proceed on that front. And basically, we have a couple of things hanging over our heads. One, we need to address the state's audit finding, determining that there is a need to repay the 2016 COPs or face the consequence of owing just under $7 million back to the state. Two, we need to figure out a pathway to complete the iTech building if so desired, and such a pathway may require a couple of $1 million of additional resources beyond what we have identified to date. Three, we need to collect remaining identified state funding, but this is dependent upon, completion of the project. And so in order to get those funds, there are some projects that need to be completed, but for what is owed to the district by virtue of the appeals in the past. And speaking of those appeals, of which there's roughly $1 million left that is owed to the district, we would like to collect those. However, the state has told us they will not provide that $1 million in funds which they owe unless the district promises to apply those funds to the repayment of the 2016 COP. In other words, you have this appeal, it's your money, but you can't have the money unless you use it as the state directs, which is to repay your 2016 COP.
So it's not going to help complete the project.
In theory, no. If we're all understanding those kind of key points as to what our top level issues we're trying to address right now are, I want to just go over the latest conversation we had with the state, which occurred in mid-December of 2020.
Okay.
Seeing no questions. We did speak with the state, I believe it was December the 17th of 2020, to provide them with an update after receiving a letter indicating that they were going to close projects which would trigger the audit thereof and the need for them to have an audit finding that the district owes back $7 million from the COP, 2016 COP that remains outstanding. We noted that the main focus that we had been working on was how to get home on the iTech building, that we did finally have success on the grant, which added $3 million in resources for the iTech building. And we were going to continue to explore options to meet the two state indicated goals, being to repay the 2016 COP and to complete the iTech building. I've been told subsequent to that by the state, that they want to see a plan of finance. They don't need to see the iTech building funding components in it. They merely need to see the repayment of the 2016 COP. It is 100% clear to me and to everyone else, I think, at the table that's been involved, that the state's real issue is having the 2016 COP repaid so that they do not have to claw back this $7 million. They did note that we could repay the $7 million over a 5-year window. We again told them that a 5-year repayment is too short of a time frame, and that per our analysis of the budgets and multi-year projections, the amount that would be required annually to repay in 5 years was too large to be accommodated during the current time frame. We also agreed to develop a plan of finance to show how the COP would be repaid. We simply told them, and this was the suggestion of the political consultants, that the COP will be repaid. That was the Greek chorus that we went back to over and over again when they asked the question, how will it be repaid? We did not have an answer per se. We simply said the 2016 COP will be repaid. Give us more time. They said, fine, you can have until the end of the current fiscal year, June 30th of 2021. And they would like to see an update on what the plan of finance is for repayment of the COP sometime in the January, February timeframe of this year. And so that is why we're having this conversation today. Want to go over things with you and figure out if there's a there, if we're okay with making these posits to them. Again, we can posit this in a letter and simply not execute in the future if it's determined that we do not want to go down this pathway. But again, we're trying to buy enough time to get to the end of the fiscal year and hopefully find some additional solutions. And Ms. Purcell, I greatly appreciate you bringing up the college. It's something that had not come across my mind as a potential assistance in the funding mix. And I'm going to explore that here in the next handful of days and see if we can get some traction on that. But what we had said was basically we will make the 2016 COP go away. And simultaneously, you know, in our internal discussions, talked about beginning to lobby electeds to apply pressure to find an equitable solution, to find someone who would listen to the history and facts in play, would take them into account, and would potentially tap the higher ups in OPSC and the Department of State Architect on the shoulder to say, you need to solve this come hell or high water. I will tell you that while there is no administrative pathway under the rules in the rule book that the state utilizes for these programs, I have been party to and privy to bending those rules with elected pressure. So it's not an impossibility by any stretch of the imagination, but we need to find the right people to carry the cause. And we have some ideas on who that might be at the state. And given the recent turn in elections and whatnot, we believe that there probably are more parties that are willing to listen than there have been in the past, including some potentially at the federal level. So there are a myriad of pathways on which we can go to try to find a solution. But at this point in time, we do not believe that additional conversations trying to explain the situation to OPSC or the state people who administer the school facilities program will really provide us with anything more than what we've heard for the last year and a half now. So it's time to, quote unquote, level up. But before we level up, here are the recommendations and sort of the plan of finance, which needs some refinement. But what we have been talking about as a working group, this is myself, your attorneys at Lozano Smith, who are your bond-related attorneys and have been addressing this matter with us, as well as your lobbyist at Capital Advisors Group, that's Jack O'Connell and Kevin Gordon's team, who are highly respected in the halls of the state legislature, and would be on this call if not for the fact that they were digesting and doing presentations about the governor's proposed budget, which came out last week. And so, what we would propose to do. First, we wish to indicate to the state that the money owed to the district for prior appeals will be applied to the COP. That will allow them to cut you a check for $1 million. That check will be sent to the district. We have been told by the same person we've been talking with at the state, wink, wink, nod, nod, we don't follow up on you actually using the money that way, but we can't release it until you tell us you're going to use it for the COP. I'm not trying to violate the promise to them, but I think receiving the money and potentially sitting on it for a month or two while we figure out how to use it as part of a broader plan is probably a good idea. It is your money, it's owed to you. We simply have to find a way to make it flow, and we cannot make it flow unless we assert to the state that it will be applied to the 2016 COP. Bear with me, next step. Next, we propose that we refund the 2016 COP balance which remains. While refunding was rejected originally by the state, we think there may be a pathway that we can do it where it would not be obvious to the state as to how it was done, and we would instead call the refunding mechanism a new loan to the Klamath Trinity Joint Unified School District. That loan would then have its proceeds applied to the 2016 COP, at least 5.8 million of those proceeds, and make that 2016 COP in substance defeased, as we call it in the parlance of legalese, but essentially paid off. The money goes into a bank account to repay the 2016 COP at a date to be defined once that money is there. And that, by legal definition in California, means that the 2016 COP is no longer outstanding. The debt has gone away.
Am I hearing you say that we got money from them, we're going to use the unused portion of that money to pay them back? I mean,
to pay off the COP to which they take offense.
Okay.
That's about $1 million that they owe you against what we will call a $7 million obligation today.
So we're using their money to pay them back?
You're using their money to pay back the COP, which in theory was an advancement of their money. And that's why I've made that important point early on about the way in which the 2016 COP was approved. It was approved as an advance of unavailable state funding. The resolution says as much in it. Not the way I would have suggested doing it if it was me at the table during that time frame, but not an uncommon way to do things, especially when the state did not have money to send out to people. Where this all got messed up was, instead of the projects coming in at cost, they came in above the estimates. And so what was available in that COP was instead used to complete projects.
Mm.
And so we didn't have the resources once the money came in from the state to repay, because that was needed for project expenditure. But by taking the $1 million they owe you, applying it to that COP, that takes 7 to 6. That leaves us with roughly $6 million, which we would refinance into a new loan. The loan you would pay otherwise, we'd refinance it. The good news is we structured what was left over and wasn't repaid in the prior COPs, that we can shorten the duration and actually probably get you a lower interest cost today than when COPs were originally issued. But that savings really is savings for your general fund into the future. It's not something that produces more money today or creates a windfall to solve project issues. It simply makes the 2016 COP go away.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, once it has gone away,
So I have a question.
you would no longer owe the state that $7 million that remains. Yes, Ms. Colgrove.
What about the 2015 COP? What if they find that offensive?
It will not, because it is under a different resolution. The resolution for 2015,
Okay.
no mention of it being an advancement of funds. I find the 2015 COP to be more problematic because it carries higher interest rates than the 16. But of what remains on that COP, we would propose the following. In the process of refinancing your 2016, making it go away, we would also like to roll what remains, about $1.4 million of 2015, into that. Taking those two COPs, creating a single issuance with a level repayment stream that we can structure to fit your budgetary projections into the future. So we've got leftover pieces right now, and we did it in such a way that we minimized the expense to the district in the near term. When we paid off the 2016 COP, the $4 million that we paid off, we'd like to compress that a little bit, smooth it out, and design it to fit with a projection that we'll work on developing with your CBO and your County Office of Education. But I'm not worried about them coming back and finding a fence with the 2015 COP, because the resolution does not provide them a nexus with which to find a fence. Excellent. So
I don't know what's excellent about it.
it's just excellent that we got those words out. We're moving on to the next bullet point, because
Okay, all right. Excellent. Forge ahead. Okay.
not excellent in terms of we're not where
Can I say something?
certainly.
I thought that the building was paid for. I had no idea there was debt. This is terrible.
There are actually two streams of debt that the district has going right now. One are these two COPs, which we talked about, which are your general fund obligations. In other words, those are repaid from your operating resources on an annual basis. The other stream of debt are your general obligation bonds, which your voters have approved in the past, which are paid by your tax base.
And my property taxes have gone way up because I voted for those bonds, you know.
Understood. That is an unfortunate reality of those. And in all honesty, it's something we brought up to the state about the relatively small size of your tax base compared to the number of students you generate, really being yet another impediment to your ability to raise funds as other school districts normally would. In a circumstance, in all honesty, what most school districts would do is they would go to their community and ask for a bond. That bond would give them roughly half of what they need. The state would arrive with the other half. It would be enough to get a project done. Right? Hardship, you get more money from the state, and in theory, you shouldn't even have bond proceeds or other proceeds available. They've kind of turned a blind eye to that, understanding that you have this small tax base, and allowed us to do some things that they could call us out on if they really wanted to, but I think we've smoothed the waters over enough that, again, their main concern, that the chorus that they give us every time we talk is the 2016 COP must go away. If it does not, district will owe us back that money. So,
Well, they're trying to get themselves out of this situation too. So
I would generally agree. I just would tell you that the parties that we talk with about the school facility program are not the same parties in the California Department of Education that care about your budget or general fund. It's a very compartmentalized set of entities. Each one is looking at their focus with their narrow concerns in mind, which is why I believe the leveling up concept suggested by the lobbyist is where we have to go, because these people in their individual silos, they're not thinking about each other. That overarching political pressure, I believe, will force them to see the big picture and be a little more acquiescent in the silos themselves.
yeah.
So if we issue this refunding debt, and I'm not calling it that officially because we've been kind of told that they don't want to see a refunding, what we would do is as follows. We would take it and size it to repay the 2016 COP that remains, the 2015 that remains, and also use it to raise any additional funds which might be required to complete the ITech building. I don't want you to do a bunch of different transactions. I want this all to be one final financing, hopefully the last financing for many, many years for the district. And by doing that combined and raising the additional money, we can meet a few requirements. Specific to the prior hardship, material inaccuracy findings, and the potential for audit findings, we would eliminate that 2016 COP. I'll tell you how we'll obscure it here in a second. Bear with me. We would also produce a level repayment stream that's more predictable, easier for the district to deal with, and reset the redemption provisions and things so that if additional unexpected sources of funds show up, you can take swipes at that COP that replaces it and hopefully size it down before its due date, minimizing its overall impact over the years on the district. We would also need to find $3 million in matching funds for the grant which you received. We discussed this with the state. There is no way to use their hardship funds as matching funds for the grant. So you would have to produce an additional $3 million either way. But you have $1 million coming in from the state. So realistically, you'd be producing net $2 million of new money. We put all this money into the same hopper at the end of the day, and what we'd call it would be based upon who we're talking to and what they need to check off on their check boxes. It doesn't change the way the financing is structured. It changes how we talk about it with different parties. Trying to get it to meet as many of the goals as possible while minimizing the overall cost to the district in the long run. That puts us in a place where if we're doing our own COP, we can stretch the repayment period out to as much as 20 years, maybe even 23 or 24. And that reduces the encroachment on an annual basis that you experience. Allows you to stay operational. I'm not saying it's the perfect situation, but it's probably the best situation that we can come up with. We could also structure that new loan to have an increasing payment over time so that we can minimize the damage in earlier years. There is some additional interest costs for that, but by doing that, it allows us more time to develop more resources and to see growth in potential funding from the state for operations, making your general fund budget hopefully a little more robust, and putting you with more time to get into a better position. We would also
More with the hedge principle of aligning long-term, long-lived assets should be financed with long-term.
I would agree.
Can't believe the timeframes in which they expected these millions of dollars to be repaid.
And those time frames are simply because, as I noted before, they have their little policy book. And in that policy book on page, it says that you must repay this in 5 years. You can offer a loan.
Even though it's for a 50-year building or something.
I totally understand that, but they're not looking at it from your perspective. They're looking at it from their statewide bond accounting perspective, and rules govern them. And so their requirements are different than your requirements. Again, this is why we believe that the administrative pathway is exhausted. That administratively, there is no other flexibility they have in their rule book. And so we need to find alternate pathways. One thing I would like to note is that let's just see here, 5 years, 1, 3, we covered all of that. We want to present a plan to the state in the next month or so as to how we will repay that COP and then potentially execute on it. Again, eliminating the audit findings. And that kind of leaves us with the question of completing ITEC. If with that COP that we're proposing, the new one, we raise the differential needed, plus the $3 million in prior hardship and the $3 million in grant funding that we have, that gets us to a universe of roughly $8 to $9 million. That's where we're going to try to have these new architects design the ITEC to fit, as opposed to allowing them to say, here's your design. Now we're going to estimate the cost, and oh, sorry, the costs come in at $15 million. We're going to say, no, you have a hard budget, and your hard budget will not exceed the following. And you got to value engineer that thing to make it work. And if that means removing walls, using less robust materials, eliminating certain equipment purchases, and allowing them to occur in the future, that's what we'll have to do to get home. Is it the perfect?
Are there constraints on, I mean, can you have a metal building on a slab? Does it have to be, bricks and mortar?
The main constraint that we're dealing with is the reality of how they determine what you're eligible for. And it's based on those statewide averages per square foot of construction. And primary constraint is that the building must have a footprint of roughly the same size as it was previously. Beyond that, no, we can use whatever roofing materials make the most sense within the cost profile. I do believe there are some concerns that we want to have your architect pay attention to ensure that we do build a building that is robust enough to survive the high amount of rain you get in your part of the world. Beyond that, no, the dictate will be value engineer everything you can.
Yeah.
That includes, if that means finding old door handles to use, again, a second time, so be it. We need to value engineer to a price point, not allow a project to come in at cost that we cannot accommodate.
Right.
There is not this infinite source of funds to make up those differentials. All those funds have been used for prior projects. There is no fluff left over to use. We're going to have to design to a strict budget. That's the one good news, I guess, about resetting this project, so to speak, is that the new architecture and construction team will be given very specific dictates and will not be allowed to run over, so to speak.
Who are they?
We don't know yet. We're still in the process of selecting.
Oh, okay.
To bring that to you next month.
It'd be nice if they were local enough that, we're not paying for people's commute and subsistence costs.
I would love that. I just don't know that you have enough people in the Willow Creek, Hoopa Valley area to make that a reality. Secondarily, what I would tell you is that as we're looking around for who, and I see you, Ms. Waddy, I'll get to you next. We did talk about who would be an appropriate fit and who do we know that does construction in more remote parts of the world at an efficient kind of manner. So this is one where we're hoping to, fingers crossed, find that right construction partner this time around and forego some of the issues we may have experienced in the past. Ms. Waddy, you have a question?
Yes. All of this has to be run through the state architect. So that's a whole nother story right there.
That is correct. We have approvals that have in theory lapsed. We have letters in requesting extension of those approvals. We also have a project which has a hardship award. We have been given assurances by the state that we can reapply for that award to slightly increase the grant amounts. We're not talking big dollars, maybe 100 grand at most, to make it a little better. But at this point in time, we'll take every penny that we can to make the situation as good as possible. But there is a lot of work to actualize this. That is not a mistaken statement.
Oh my.
With that being said, let me just wrap up. There are a few minor points that I want to get to here. In terms of that replacement financing that we talked about, what I will call on this call, we'll call the new COP, although it probably will have a different name. Here's how we're proposing to make that work and make it maybe okay with the state. When you issue a COP as a standalone district, across the top of the cover of the document that is the offering document for that COP, you will find the name Klamath Trinity Joint Unified School District, the amount borrowed, the year, and certificate of participation. That is the normal way of doing things, but there are other ways to facilitate very similar loans with very similar structures, including the use of what we call lease revenue bonds. And a lease revenue bond is the same thing as a COP, only with a different kind of name and using some different state code sections to make it a reality. What a lease revenue bond is essentially a lease where you enter into a lease for your own property, and that lease for your own property then becomes the payment to pay debt which is offered to the public. In a certificate of participation, it's called a certificate of participation because the certificate is participating in that lease. In other words, they are a pass-through recipient of the funds. This gets into miscellaneous arcane pieces of state law, basically that say you cannot loan to yourself. In other words, you cannot issue a loan where you're leasing property from yourself to pay yourself. It's just illegal in the state of California. So you have to find a third party. And this is done all the time. You would not be the first district to do a COP. Your existing COPs have a third party, which you have granted title to your property to, so that they can lease it back to you to facilitate a revenue to pay bond owners. It's a bit convoluted, but to accommodate state law, that's how it's done. However, this new COP would have a very similar underlying lease. The district would lease one of its own properties, perhaps the same property that is engaged for the 15 or 16 lease, simply moving it from those leases once they're paid off to be used as the property for the new lease, not changing anything about really how the lease is set up, but rather you would sell that as part of a pool. You and other districts which are seeking to raise small amounts of money would combine your leases, and that pool would then have a authority which issues debt to the public secured by these various underlying leases. Why does that matter? Because on the face of the document for which we offer that new COP to the public, it might read the California Municipal Finance Authority, a state entity that's known to do these sorts of pass-through arrangements. It would not say Klamath Trinity Joint Unified School District. That would probably be enough for electeds to say, looks different to me. This is not a COP. It's not a new COP. It's a borrowing that was done by this district on its own. And keep in mind, the state's own mechanism for that $7 million repayment would be a borrowing. It just would be a borrowing directly through the state, as opposed to one you structured yourself. The differential being they would only allow you 5 years, whereas here, in this case, we could combine you with many other issuers, take advantage of economies of scale, reduce your overall cost for facilitating the issuance by sharing it with other entities, and also removing your name from the face of the offering document so that it no longer has the appearance of a certificate of participation of the district. That is the best thing that we have come up with. We've talked about it with the political consultants. They believe that the electeds will see the merits in that. What they told me was that they did not want to engage in negotiations with electeds or conversations with electeds and not be able to say that the 2016 COP was not going to be paid off. They want us to be in a position where we can say, yes, we're going to pay that COP off. If you want details on how, the district is going to take out a separate private loan that may be part of a pool. And that is very similar to the option that was provided to you by the state. Only in this case, you dictate the terms of that loan, not the 5 years prescribed by the state. And I think we can get a better interest rate than what the state has been offering on many of its offerings in recent time frame. We can probably get it done cheaper as part of a pool as well.
So is this pool state funds or is it investment capital? Is it
It's
like
investment
venture
capital.
Okay.
It would be
So
private investment capital.
You're basically going to syndicate a loan from a group of venture capitalists or investment capitalists or something.
It's more formalized than that in terms of it's kind of a standard procedure that we use. But at the end of the day, investment banks would be the investors. The pool would be an issuance by this authority, securitized by leases from various public entities that provide the revenue stream to pay the investors off.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. I've got a few more notes here. What else? Because there is some else, and there are some things that still bother me. The first one being that this entire process has put this district in a very disadvantageous place with respect to its general fund. I looked back in time. You were once a district that had very strong reserves, very, very strong reserves. You no longer have strong reserves. They've all been expended because of these facility projects. I wish I was in a place where I could replenish your reserves in totality, but that is just not in the cards. Again, we made that assertion early on and we're told, stop it, you're not getting more. And there is an argument that some would say that if you look at how much the district has received in comparison to other districts and state funds, you guys have gotten a decent amount of money at the end of the day. I'm not going to say it was perfect. I'm not going to say it was ideal. I'm not going to say it didn't incur a significant amount of pain for the district or its students during the course of those times. but you did kind of get a decent amount of money in comparison to what others would get for projects like this. Neither here nor there, just a point that I want to make, because what I would like to do is when we size that replacement COP, there are some recent expenditures that the district has made for projects. I would like to bundle those all up, and to the extent we have any capacity that it can be accommodated, reimburse the district's general fund for that. It's not going to be a super huge amount of money, but it is my understanding in conversations with your county office of ed that there are some monies from the general fund which have been lent to your facilities project fund and will eventually need to be repatriated. I want to at least repatriate that amount so that we can undo the money that's been borrowed from the general fund and replace that component of your fund balance. Doesn't increase your fund balance, just doesn't make the situation any worse for you going forward with respect to the general fund. That is something that I will try to get home on an analysis. And Ms. Burcell, you're muted, so if there is something you want to say, do unmute.
So it doesn't increase the fund balance?
No, because right now that fund balance is still in your general fund. The recognition of the loan to the other fund is a liability, the receivable. If you were to unspool that and make it a transfer and formally transfer that money over to the facility fund, it then becomes a outflow, which reduces your fund balance.
Okay.
So now there's an IOU from the project fund in the general fund that has to be repaid. If we don't, then it does become a draw on fund balance.
Oh.
Produce the additional money, we can hold that fund balance where it is. I know it's not more money, but it's not exacerbating the problem, and that would be my goal.
Have you looked at the balance sheet? Because I think our reserves are just about depleted. I don't know what balance you're talking about. It might even be a negative balance by the end of this year.
That's why we would like to replenish those amounts. I believe when we unspool that IOU, goes away, the cash comes back in, you're trading an asset for an asset, but your fund balance won't go any lower.
Okay.
Without moving that money back, according to the county office, we would have to recognize the outflow, which would then require the fund balance in the general fund to be reduced.
Okay.
I saw another hand raised. Is there another question?
Shin, this is Laura Lee. When can you, sorry, Khadijah, can you give everyone an estimate of how much money we did receive for our buildings?
Ooh. Off the top of my head, I cannot, but I want to say it was something on the order of 80 million and change. It may be more at this point in time, but it was a significant amount of money, and I have it in a presentation. Not general.
I was thinking it was closer to 100 million.
It may at this point in time have accreted closer to that. I'm just trying to look back here.
But it's nothing that we need to know tonight, but I just thought it was a significant amount of money that we have in our facilities.
It was. Unfortunately, it was not enough. As the construction was executed in the initial phases, but it was a pretty good haul, so to speak. A decent amount was in hardship. Keep in mind, you started out on the 50-50 kind of standard modernization program initially, and then moved into hardship in phase 2. So your first set of projects were only half funded by the state and half funded by local resources, mainly being GEO bond proceeds and some COP proceeds. Your second phase projects and going forward were all under hardship. It's just that those cost more than the hardship provided, thereby causing you to draw down the funds that were in the COP and leaving us in a place where we are today, all that history.
I understand all that. I was just wondering if you had the dollar amount on your top.
I don't, but I can get that amount, and I will true that up. I've got an old presentation that's indicating 87, but I think there's been some flow of funds since then, so let me pull that and update it.
Okay, Khadijah.
And Ms.
My
Colville.
question was, what was the overall My question was, what was the overall cost and how much was paid for and what the debt was on? So it was just a question about the finances. And I don't know if you can give me that right now. And I don't need it right now, but I would like to see what we're looking at. Because, you know, if $10 million is, you know, 5% or 10% of the overall cost, that's different than if it's, you know, 20% or.
I totally understand that. What I will do is I was hesitant to put together a presentation for a couple of reasons. One, it would be extremely long, and I'm not sure how much the graphics would have added to telling the history, et cetera. Two, I don't want to have a document in play that the state might look up where we're talking about planning and how we can, for lack of a better description, game the system to get ourselves to an adequate resolution to these issues. But I will put together some slides which give you some of this history and background, specifically the amounts expended and whatnot. Just let me present those to the staff and then we'll get those to you, including the accounting of general fund resources provided to projects, overall project costs, state funding, et cetera, to give you a macro sense of what this all entailed to get to this point.
Thank you.
No worries, no worries. Other stuff.
Members. Carrie.
A few
Is
more.
this-
Go ahead.
Is
Yes,
is this session
Yes.
available on YouTube video?
I believe it is.
Yes, it is.
Okay. I was just wondering about your choice of words there.
Yeah, I use it colloquially, but what I would say is this, is that downloading something that they can pass around to others is one thing. Having someone go through an hour and 30 minutes of YouTube is something totally different. And again, we're committing to nothing here. We're simply talking about options that are available to you to rectify this problem. Ms. Waddy, you've been more than kind to wait. I apologize.
thank you. I appreciate your creative financing. It sounds like you've really thought this out, and I really appreciate it. I'm wondering if we can go, and you said this earlier, and somebody mentioned it earlier, if we can go to possibly Jared Huffman or the governor and have our case stated to them so they can see, because I'm pretty sure that, you know, they have been pushing that kids that are in the state that our kids in our district are in need more support.
Mhm.
And this isn't the way to do it, is to put our district in debt.
No, I would totally agree. And this is why, again, we've determined that the administrative pathways are exhausted. The little rule book that they use at OPSC doesn't have an answer for us. We have had in our mind what these talking points are. We've raised them with OPSC and with DSA in the school facility program discussions or the SFP discussions. There just is no checkbox for that in their form, so to speak. But the electeds do understand the concept of high service need population, the unique demographics of the population, the unique fundamentals of the tax base being smaller than normal. These are all things that we've actually been talking with people in the legislature about for the past decade, even since the implementation of LCFF, as to how to find a more equitable and fair funding system. But on the facilities front, it's a bit of a difficult one because we have a system in place. This project did not fit that system well, did not end up in a good result. And the resulting harm to those same populations that they've identified as needing additional support is beyond what we think is reasonable and is really meriting special consideration, the type of consideration one can only get via a legislative backing. And so that's the direction we're thinking of going. There's also been some folks that have been elected to the legislature that may have some ties to the Indian and Native communities, which we believe may be willing to help as well. And so we will work with the lobbying team to get you a kind of list of names of folks to talk with. These are folks that we have actually, in some cases, talked with in the past, trying to find some resolution to prior issues. But it's one where we're going to need some of you all at the local level to commit to being part of that. We actually had been wanting to do this in the latter parts of last year. But unfortunately, given the pandemic and just the inability to conduct meetings in a regular manner, really have held that off. We are hopeful that we can get this done in such a way that we can get all those parties to pay attention, have the bandwidth and understanding of what this means for this district, and see the merits in encouraging their administrative staff to allow for a solution to occur, and maybe even convince them to enhance that solution to mitigate some of the other issues. But I make no promises on that. Fundamentally, when it comes to school facility program money, there's a wait list. There's been a wait list for the last 8 or 9 years, I believe it is. And they already are, I believe, $1 billion beyond what they have left authorized, to distribute. The existing statewide school bond, in theory, is bereft of money at this point in time and won't be replenished until 2022 at the earliest. So your problem is a big problem for you locally, but part of many problems along this front at the state level. And it's one that doesn't fit well into any of the boxes and really is going to need that legislative lobbying effort, I think, to provide the best solution we can find possible. Keep in mind, we do want to make sure that whatever our solution is, it's a viable solution long-term. So there will be some work we have to do with your CBO, your business office, and the county office of education to verify that and make sure that we're structuring things appropriately. And it will, take a lot of work to actualize this plan. But we do believe in our heart of hearts that there is a moral obligation on our consulting team side to try to find an answer to the ITech building and also to get us out of this morass with the state and make them stop requesting additional funds from this district. And we're hopeful that overall we can put together a plan to place, how I'd like to talk about it is, all of the prior activities into its own little box, all the hardship, all the borrowings, all that stuff go into this one little box. And because we're getting grant funds, school hardship funds, and appeals funds that are actually amounts that are in excess of what the COP outstanding is, we can legitimately say, wink, wink, nod, nod, we have taken your state aid money and applied it to repayment of that COP. We would then engage in this new financing. I'd like to talk about it this way, kind of for public consumption, to close the gap on completion of the ITech. That gives us kind of a very clean, old stuff, new stuff. The old stuff all being the stuff that's subject to the prior audits and to the prior lookbacks, and we can structure it in such a way that they'll see that these state monies they sent you paid off this COP. We then immediately go back out and re-raise those funds with a direct debt, one debt, a single debt, replacing your 2 existing COPs, and put you in a place where hopefully you can go forward without this becoming an issue into the future, your facilities buttoned up, and not having to think about this stuff for at least the next decade or 2. I would note that you could at some point seek another GO bond to pay off that future COP, but I don't think that's a critical component to this discussion right now. It's just a potential relief valve that may be made available to the district in the future if you want to go down that pathway and pursue that. I wouldn't encourage pursuing it at this point in time. There's no utility to doing it at this point in time, and it wouldn't occur until 2022 in all reality, at the soonest beyond the time frame when we would be considering that. There was some thought process that went into looking at a geo bond effort in 2020, but given where tax rates are in your district, given the fact you guys approved a bond in 2008 and in 2016, we'd like to at least let that kind of 8-year window pass before we, look at a potential other bond. And in all honesty, given how small your tax base is, the bond that we would pursue probably would be sufficient to pay off a decent share of any new borrowing, but would not raise enough probably to close the entire loop. That being said, it could be a way to eliminate the repayment of this debt from your general fund for a period of years, allowing you to operate without those headaches and mitigate what you have to repay in debt if your voters would be so willing. But that's all down the line and really not something I think that is germane to answering the state's question. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to be able to stand in front of those actors at the school facilities program and say, we have repaid the 2016 COP.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for Shin? We still have our action items before us tonight.
I apologize for the length.
I'm just wondering, what are the odds that this strategy will come to fruition, or do we need to be working on other strategies too?
I believe looked at a bunch of strategies. This is an amalgamation of the best pieces of all the strategies that we have talked about. Keep in mind, we presented a comprehensive finance plan of any and every possible option, whether realistically viable or simply a shot in the dark, to them previously. And that was what was required to make them cease with the material inaccuracy. In terms of actualizing this plan, I am 100% certain we can actualize it. Will the state be acquiescent to every component of it? I have a high degree of confidence on the conversation with the lobbyists that we can get acquiescence for it with the right parties giving us backing, but it would require a lobbying effort to get us there. In terms of alternatives, I would honestly say that the only thing that really comes to the fore is some sort of a lawsuit against the state, and that's tedious and tenuous at best. You're getting into a whole morass of code sections that I always have fear when we go before a judge. How much do they know? How much do they understand? How much will they read on the fly and try to cobble up their own answers for? Keep in mind that, our judges are not necessarily experts in how state programs operate. And so you leave up to the whims of a judge's interpretation how they might view things. And I don't want to go there because, in all honesty, litigation costs additional money. Effort, and we've tried to spare your new superintendent from some of the foibles that have taken over the lives of prior superintendents, but so far Jennifer has not had to make monthly trips down to Sacramento to sit down with OPSC. I think in the best of all worlds, we can get an answer that the state accepts, avoid a bunch more trips down, and really allow you guys just to focus on the core mission for the next handful of years without this axe hanging over your head.
Great, thank you.
Carrie.
Does she need a direction from us to let him know what to pursue?
We don't have, this is not an action item right now, and I understood you were coming to the next month's board meeting.
That is correct. And what I would say is that if what I've talked about now as a proposal to present to the state is acceptable, we will craft that language and begin to have conversations with the state about it, indicating to the state that there is no formal agreement to this plan by the board at that point in time, but that we have discussed it with the board, and we believe that if all parties can see things in a similar manner, could be a viable pathway. I'm always hesitant to commit us to things with the state because those commitments may be taken as promises, and I don't want to break any more promises with the state. I want to make sure that we, do our best to, again, show the state how, and I think they will appreciate this, how this puts an end to what has really been a near decade-long saga between the state and this district, and allow everyone to move on to greener pastures, so to speak, in the future. Again, there's a part of me in my heart of hearts that wants to, not be as nice with the state, stick a thumb in their eye and say, pay this district what you owe. But I don't think that approach will get us to where we want to be. I think it will put us back toward the material inaccuracy finding and put us in a place where the potential downsides are worse than what they would be in any other circumstance. So you're getting our best, most refined at this point version of what we think can be viably done. If there are no tacit objections to it, we will write it up into a document format focusing on what the state said they wanted us to focus on, which was how do you make the 2016 COP go away? They don't even care how you get to the end of the road on the iTech building. But from the community standpoint, we believe that is a requirement as well. I've been up there. I know what the iTech building means. I've talked with members of the community about it. I understand why it needs to be brought back into play. I wish that this had come together in a much better way. But when we inherited it, it was quite the mess. And I think we've gotten it to a point of stasis where what we're proposing is viable, probably survivable, and is probably the best of the options that we can present on the table at this time.
Okay, well, we have to look at all of the work that you've put into this and all the study and your expertise. So I appreciate all that. And I don't have any objections, and I don't know if anyone else on the board does. So
I'm a thumbs up person.
we'll see you at the next month's board meeting then, or
That is correct. And you have my commitment that prior to that meeting, I will try to have for your board packets, actually, the information that you wanted as follow-on, as well as a draft of the communication with draft clearly as watermarked across the front as one possibly can for discussion and consideration. And then from there, we'll be looking to rally troops to begin conversations with electeds and pursue some political pressure to hopefully get acquiescence to the plan, and fingers crossed, maybe even some beyond what the plan indicates to try to get you into a stable position. There were numerous times, I don't say this with any lightness, over the last several years, where the state said, this or material inaccuracy finding, and we're ready to pull the material inaccuracy finding trigger right now. And we basically told your then superintendent, if you go down there and they insist on that, you take the keys to the district office out of your pocket, you place them on the table, and tell the state to enjoy running that district. They were not offering you viable options. We want to at least get to a universe where we have some viable options and allow us the flexibility to plot a, albeit not ideal, but survivable course over the next handful of years.
good. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm trying to move our meeting along here.
Jen,
So any other questions of Shin? Okay, thank you. Very informative. Appreciate all your work.
I appreciate everyone taking the time to get up to speed on this complex matter. Again, for board members, if you have follow-on questions, by all means, please coordinate through Jennifer, but I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations and follow up accordingly so that we can get you comfortable.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you. You have a good evening, and maybe you get to go see the rest of the concerts.
I'm going to look for some food now, and I will see you all next week, maybe a few pounds lighter, but
Okay, thank
we
you.
can live with that. Take care all.
Thank you.
Okay. So we will move to our action items. We have 3. And we did, I believe, Trish, have someone who had a public comment.
Yes.
So our our action item is Indian policies, action item 7A, Indian policies and procedures, board policy 0410.1 revision. Board policy 0410.1 is required to be ratified yearly by January 31st for the Impact Aid application. Indian Policies and Procedures Task Force is proposing revisions in order to update the policy and keep in legal compliance. They're asking to approve revisions to BP 0410.1. Do I have a motion? We have to have a motion before we can discuss.
This is Carrie Waddy, and I move that we approve the Indian Policies and Procedures Board Policy 0410.1 revision.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, Debbie Myers.
Debbie seconds. Thank you. Okay. Discussion. Now Trish.
I do have a public comment on this item.
Okay.
Before I get to that, I just want the record to reflect that we lost Trustee Wild and Trustee McLaughlin, and I believe it was due to the power outage.
Okay.
So I will share my screen with a comment. This comment is from Erica Tracy, the Hoopa Tribal Education Director. It reads, in general, for tonight's meeting, I am not opposed to the passing of the board policy as it is needed for the Impact Aid compliance, and I assume the release of funds / application approvals, but did want to highlight some specific components of the board policy and bring those to the attention of the board as it currently reads as a compliant policy. It should be noted that there are definite areas that need to be improved upon, and although with action this evening, it will read as compliant, it therefore seems that implementation should take effect immediately or attempted to be enforced by the board / district based on a template that Margo was provided. For example, a stipulation is formal correspondence in writing. To my knowledge, we as IPP have not received any formal responses to our IPP recommendations or comments over the years. So going forward, if as IPP or individual tribes provide requests or comments in writing, it is my understanding that the district will now need to formally respond also in writing. Based on our most recent meeting, we will be planning to prepare full IPP recommendations to present the board ideally by the March regular meeting, and will do so in writing as we have done most years. This time with the expectation that a response will be issued based on tonight's approved policy. There are other noteworthy areas of the IPP board policy, but that seems like the quickest concrete example of a significant change of policy that will now need to follow with practice. I also had a scheduling conflict with the regular meeting earlier this month, so wasn't able to attend, but just wanted to introduce myself / welcome the new / current board in the new year. Thanks, Erica Eva Tracy.
Okay. Discussion, Margo?
Yes. So after putting the existing board policy into the format that the Department of Education required, I sent it out to members of the IP task force and received a comment from Jim McQuillan that to add face-to-face meetings to the tribe's preferred method of communication.
Is that in our draft here at present?
No, it was after it had already been submitted to the board for the board agenda. So
okay.
I would. I'm hopeful
Okay,
that
so-
that will be added into.
Margot,
I,
who was it that requested that? Just so I can record it in the minutes.
Jim
Jim
McQuillan.
McQuillan, you're Director of Education.
Now, I have a question,
So this,
Margot. On the draft we have, what's in
yes.
red? Is that the only changes that are made here? It looks like subheadings.
Right, so that is, it was just the questions on the template.
And so it makes it easier to read, and this is where we address that item on the template.
Right. So I did not change anything from the board policy that was presented to the board last time. I just fit the information into the proper places in this template. And I meticulously went through the policy numerous times, again and again and again, to make sure that everything was did but not changed, except for to put it into this template form, which is nice because it makes it easy to read now.
Yes, it is. It's easier for the reader. Okay, and so where should Jim McQuillan's suggestion go? What page? Do you know?
Right at the very
Beginning.
beginning of the policy, and where it says the tribe's preferred method of communication is, it's right at the very beginning.
Oh, okay. So it would read face-to-face, mail, email, newspaper, radio flyers, posted locally, and
Right.
telephone calls. Now, by face-to-face, are we including Zoom?
I guess that would, I don't know. Hopefully someday we're going to be past these Zoom days and can have real face-to-face meetings.
I don't know.
Well, you could clarify it as in-person and or virtual Zoom meetings. So that we're kind of covered both ways in the meantime.
I like that. Okay.
This is Carmi. In Jim's comment also, he so
Can you
noted,
clarify where it is we're adding this?
I didn't
It's
hear you, Carmen.
at the very beginning.
It's
Jim,
on
I
page
found
20.
where it goes, but I didn't get Carmi's comment.
Jim's pointed out it was 2.3, and that's on page 31, but page 4 of the IPP policy. So page 4 of the policy and page 31 in your agenda items, he referenced 2.3, but Margot also is correct in pointing out that it is also in the beginning on page 1 where it begins. So there's actually 2 spots that it would reference, because there's 2 spots that talk about communication. So just for clarification, and you may have to, or you will have to amend your motion to include those changes.
Right. I was just going there.
Thank you.
Okay, good catch there. So the motion makers, do you amend your motion?
I was the, okay.
That was Carrie?
I was the motion maker. And
Okay.
I would like to amend the preferred method. Oh, let's see. I would like to move that we accept the Indian Policies and Procedures Board Policy 0410.1 revision with an amendment to the tribe's preferred methods of communication to include by face-to-face and
Virtual?
face-to-face and virtual. Thank you, whoever provided that.
Okay, second, with the second, accept that amendment?
Does it say meetings? It needs to be face-to-face and or virtual Zoom meetings.
I said that.
Oh, you had meetings?
In person or virtual?
I didn't have the word meetings in there. I said the preferred methods of communication is by face-to-face, virtual, to include face-to-face and virtual in the preferred methods of communication. That's what I said. Do you want to read that back to us, Tricia?
Yes, so the motion that I had down that was amended, approve revisions to BP 0410.1 with changes. Add face-to-face and virtual meetings to the tribe's preferred method of communication, as well as under 2.3.
So that's on pages 28 and 31.
Yes.
Was that the correct motion, Trustee Waddy?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Are we going to address Erica's request?
Is that, where is that in the policy? That, do we need to adjust the policy at all? Or just?
Included,
I think it's,
pointing it out.
I think it's implementing it. Margot?
Okay.
Right, it's in the policy. She's just, that it's in there and that the expectation is that the district will, implement it, start beginning this year.
Right.
Yeah, she said.
And I have talked to the superintendent about that previously. Khadijah?
So this is Trustee Colgrove. I have a question. So who is responsible for the implementation? Is it the superintendent or is it Margot? Margot, I'm sorry, what is your job title?
I'm the Indian Education and Native Language Director for the school district.
Okay, so I would like some clarification in knowing who is responsible for implementing these things in this policy. Is it the superintendent or is it?
Everything rests with the superintendent, and she can delegate if that's the structure. She's in charge of all of the employees. So, okay. Are there, who made the second to that motion, and did they approve the amendment?
Debbie Myers did, and we haven't, there hasn't been a vote taken yet.
Could I make another comment?
I need to address the second. Did you agree with the amendment?
Yes, I did. Yes, I second.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. Any other questions?
Margot had a question.
Margot?
I have a comment for Trustee Colgrove. If you are specific, if your question was specific to the written comment to the IPP task force about the recommendations, then that needs to come from the superintendent and or the board of trustees.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? I will call for the vote. Then Trish, could you poll the board?
Trustee Myers,
E.
Trustee Colgrove?
Yes.
Trustee Bursell,
Yes.
Trustee Waddy,
Yes,
Trustee George,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. The next item, action item 7B, ratification of job descriptions, Indian Education School Site Representative. Ratification of job descriptions for the Indian education school site rep positions. These descriptions have been approved by CSEA. A recommendation is to approve the ratification to the Indian education school site rep positions. Do I have a motion?
This is Terry Waddy. I move that we approve ratification of job descriptions, Indian education school site representative.
I just got kicked off again. I'm back. Sorry.
And I second that motion. Debbie
Who
Who
Myers.
is that?
Debbie
We have a mo-
Myers.
We have a motion from trustee Waddy to approve the ratification of the positions. We have a second from trustee Myers.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes, in the first description, item 3, and the second, item 4, principal should be PAL, site principal.
Any other comments or discussion?
So, I'm sorry, this position is it coming out of the Indian Education Department? Is that Margot's program?
Yes.
Yes, it is. So we have
Okay.
reps from 3 different funding sources under the Indian Education Program. There are the Title VI and the American Indian Early Childhood Education Program, as well as the Wild Rivers Grant. So we want to rename, they actually are. We have a really hard time filling these positions because, I mean, who knows what a site rep is? So we're trying to make it more apparent in the hopes that it'll be easier to fill these positions.
Okay.
I have a
I was
question.
just trying to connect the dots, huh?
I have a
Well-
question. So it looks like the funding is identified for this year, but there's a proposal to transfer to general fund after this year.
Her resource is within the general fund.
Are you looking at the next item, trustee Bursell?
Yeah. So we're looking at these separately, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I do have a question, one more question. I don't see a wage on the paperwork.
What you're,
There's a,
what-
it falls in a range.
yeah, down at the bottom of the
Okay.
last page, range 8, 10-month employee. And so that goes back to the classified salary schedule, which is being squared up right now. And this was approved by the CSEA, so I assume that it's, that range is where the negotiations are handling.
Yeah, it's still attached to the current salary schedule because we've been working, Margot's proposed this quite a while ago. So once we're finished with negotiations, then it'll be updated along with any other positions. But it's on the current, range 8 is a current or old, hopefully, salary schedule.
Okay. Any other
Is that a
questions?
good wage? Because, we want to be paying this person enough so that we can keep them and that we can attract a good work pool, because I think that it's an important job and we need to be compensating people so that we can get a good service provided.
Are you asking what the salary range is? I don't.
I'm just asking you to take that into account when we're putting this together, you get what you pay for. And I think the extra support is necessary for this position.
I
I
completely
don't know how
agree.
to answer you other than there is a range. So within range 8, depending on how many years they've been here, I don't know what the beginning and the ending range is in dollar amounts.
And that's the amount paid for 10 for.
They're a 10-month employee, yes. We have 10, an 11, and a 12-month employees in our district.
Okay.
If I may,
Basis for 10 months, or is it range 8 as an annualized salary?
No,
The salary schedules will be coming forward. Unless Margot, if you can answer any of these.
I can answer. This is Carmen.
Carm, go ahead.
Okay, it's range 8 on the salary schedule. And as you can see there that the union did their ratification on it. And so they've placed the salary. It would be a 10-month employee, 8 hours a day on range 8. Range 8 starts at $14.24 an hour, and it is 6 steps, goes all the way up to $17.71.
So it's based on an hourly rate, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Go ahead, Margot.
The Title VI and AIECE positions are 6 hours a day, and the Wild Rivers 8 hours a day.
Should that be on the, well, I don't know if that needs to be on here.
It is on there. It has 10 months, 8 hours a day, and then the range 8 with an additional stipend. It's at the
Okay, so
bottom
it's
of this
covered.
first of this job description.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
On the second, on the other, on the AIECE says range 8, 10 month. It doesn't have the hours.
Yeah, it doesn't say.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, I can, and I'll bring that back. Well, depending on what I can, can bring that back
Okay.
to Holly and Walt. It's funny, they signed off on it a while ago and we didn't catch that. So 6
Okay.
hours, Margot? Range 8, 10 months, 6 hours a day?
Yes,
Thank you.
Oh, we're talking about
that is AIECE and Title VI funded ones,
okay.
and the Wild Rivers is an 8-hour position.
Okay.
So that's
Thank
be
you for that.
amended.
Thank you for that clarification, Margot, because I thought we were going into another discussion with the other job description. We're doing it.
Not yet, not yet.
Okay.
Margot, can you clarify that for me one more time? I'm sorry, I'm not typing as fast as I need to be right now.
So the Title VI and AIECE positions are 6-hour employees, and the Wild Rivers one is an 8-hour a day employees.
So Trish,
page
it's the
37.
academic support coach 2 is the one that is the 6 hour that doesn't have it identified.
The way I put it was just adding the 6 hours to page 39,
Yes.
but I
Great.
know you need more there.
Hmm.
Okay, any other discussion, questions? Let's go for the vote. Trish, could you?
One moment, I was just clarifying the minutes. Okay, so trustee George,
Yes.
trustee Waddy,
Yes.
trustee Bursell,
Yes.
trustee Myers, trustee Colgrove, Motion passes.
Okay, we will go to action item 7C, ratification of new position, behavioral specialist. Ratification of new job description. CSEA has already approved this description. Approve the job description for new position, behavioral specialist, and open the position immediately. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve this new position, behavior specialist.
This is Debbie.
Yes, this is Debbie Myers.
Okay, is there a second?
This is Carrie Waddy, and I second.
Okay, discussion.
I would like to clarify the motion. Motion by trustee Debbie Myers to approve the job description for the new position. Did you want to include that we open the position?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
thank you.
immediately.
And does the second approve that amendment?
I do approve.
Thank you.
So this is not part of the Indian Education Program. This is separate from the positions we just approved.
This is special.
Yes, yeah. So the
Okay.
currently the
All right.
district has,
That provides clarification.
yeah, and that we did the other two positions as one movement, as one motion. They were related and they'd been before the board. So we, I think it was November. I lost my note on November, bringing this job description to the board. I know that there's been administrative discussion about a position like this for quite some time. So currently the district has two behavior support assistant positions, and those they're the behavior support world is in special education. In addition to having those positions, the district contracts with the County Office of Education for additional kind of some oversight and supervision of those behavior support assistants. So the director of special ed, and I've talked with people at the SELPA, which is our special education local plan area, and the County Office of Education, just consulting with them to ask, is this a good direction for us to move? So the intent is to create a position where we could have some more autonomy and reduce our contracted services with the county and have a position that requires higher qualifications and more experience than the current, what we have, which are great. They're behavior support assistants, but this would be a behavior specialist. They would have some more authority in terms of supervising and supporting students. In the first year, we would still require some contracting with the county because we would need somebody with the board certification. The part that was brought up about transitioning, we would keep it in special education and presumably be replacing some of the expenditures for the contracted services. And I would probably recommend at some point that we reduce one of the behavior support assistants, but we want to just kind of start with this. The idea of transferring it to the general fund would be, we'd have to kind of see what the results are, because it would be consistent with our goals to moving the district toward having more inclusive education, providing behavioral supports for students that are not in special education, and providing early interventions with behaviors, supporting classroom teachers and other school staff to create environments that are supportive from the beginning. So it's not always just responding to behaviors. It's kind of getting in from the early stages. So that's what I think it's the proposal would be to approve the position and fly it. And the part about the funding source transitioning, I wouldn't put wouldn't be part of the proposal. It's just to give you kind of the thinking behind it, how we'd like to move behavior supports out of just being in special ed.
One of my questions
So
is
the amount that's listed,
how much is this costing us above what our contracted services cost?
Well, I looked back, Carmi was able to generate a report of over the years, and it's not a whole lot more because, last year was I would say is the exception. I have, you know, it's in the 30 to 40,000 that we contract with the county. And I would imagine, you know, we're not going to completely sever ties with them. But so 2020 was not really a good year, but during the 2019-2020 school year, I'm sorry, 18-19, you know, we were upwards of $40,000 that we paid to the county. And one of the things that we get frustrated with, any you know, district that's not Eureka or freshwater also has, you know, it's kind of diminishing returns when you contract when there's live services, because we're paying people for their mileage and the time to drive out here. I mean, a lot of things with the contracted services could be in our favor in the future because we've all learned to do virtual meetings, but we're just kind of, we're looking at the idea of growing our own. So with benefits, what my calculation is, this would be about $47,000. We already have a position. I would suggest this replaces the other position. So it would really be a net. It wouldn't be, it would kind of be a net swapping from the contracted and then the position, that one of the positions we have now. Yeah, that was the big thing we talked about. The salary is 35. Benny's would be close to, would be 11 on top of that.
So is this salary for the rest of the year, or is it a yearly salary? So is it 6 months out of the year, or is it 12 months out of the year?
No, it's the salary. So if it's, anybody's hired would be prorated.
It looks like.
So for for this year, it's not going to cost us.
It will be, you get a monthly check.
Yeah, they would be paid whatever number of months they're working.
So Sue?
So
Is it hourly or is it salaried? It says 195 days at 8 hours a day, which is 1,560 hours, which is 2267 on an hourly rate.
It's hourly. Yeah.
Okay. And has CSEA approved it?
They did.
Caduce, I cut you off. Sorry.
yeah, you did. So my question is, are we going to get a qualified person who is going to be able to do a good job at this yearly salary? This is what a first-year teacher is making, right? I mean, that's kind of what we're coming in at.
It's a 3/4 position.
So that's not 8 hours of.
It says 8 hours daily.
It says 8 hours daily.
It's the number. I think that Sue's looking at the number of days in terms of.
I'm looking at the number of days.
Right. It's not a 12-month position.
Yeah.
So Carmi, what
So
is
we're
this?
asking for somebody with a bachelor's degree and years of experience working with our kids to come in at a low salary, right?
I don't know what range M is. Carmi, could you tell us what the range starts and ends at?
Oh, that would be on the new one. And Sue did get she kind of.
Well, right now,
mathed it out backwards.
currently, we don't have a new one. So our starting pay would be $14.74 with 0 steps. That's what the current range that is set currently.
So I think another thing to consider is there's not even a position. So approving the job, one kind of approving the job description, if it's the intent of the district to move in that direction. And then I guess,
So,
the range is based on the newer, it's basically based on a projected.
Did you guys want the average from?
Carmen, can you clarify for me the hourly amount?
Say that again.
Can you clarify for me the hourly amount that this person is going to be making?
$14.74 based on the current salary schedule.
So we're gonna fly up. Okay, so we're gonna fly a position for somebody with a bachelor.
As it stands
As it's-
currently until we negotiate with our union, that is what the current salary is based on the salary schedule for a classified employee. Yes.
So another possibility is to approve the job description and then fly it once we have an actual updated salary schedule. Because it would be based, we would have to wait until there's actually a ratified salary schedule. So we're not,
Yeah,
If I'm,
it is
Reading
kind of
this
a cart before the horse because they approved it based on a range that doesn't really exist yet.
Okay.
but
Sue?
if I multiply 195 days times 8 hours, I get 1,560 hours. And if I divide this salary by that, it comes out to 22.67 per hour.
Does this,
Well, there's a big difference between 2267 and 1475.
Yeah, almost twice as.
So yeah, and Carmi's giving you numbers on the current salary schedule, which is, we're looking, because that's what is actually the reality. What she's telling you is like, as of today, that's what that range is.
and what the CSEA and the district has been negotiating is redoing those salary schedules.
Mhm.
So is this job description looking at what they think the salary is going to end up being?
That's that, yes. When we had the discussions, it's based on something they want to project out. So it could be attached to, our financial impact was an estimate. It's an estimate. It'll be placed at range M. And so yeah. Carm?
And if I may, you had a
Mhm.
question in regards to what we currently pay the county for the behavioral specialist. The behavioral
Yes.
specialist. The behavioral specialist services began in 2017. So in 2017, the first year, it was 26,451. In 2018, it was 57,415. Moving into 2019, it was 41,822. Come last year, with the unfortunate circumstances that we were in, it only came up to 9,175, and nothing as of today's date.
And was the low amount for last year because of COVID?
I believe, yes, I want to say that it was.
Okay, so we were looking at 47 there. Okay, well, I think
So-
with this job description, it's saying range M, wherever that lands on the new negotiated salary schedule. We can approve the job description, and then we'll have to approve the salary, the negotiations when it comes to us from the CSEA and the district of that.
So
revised.
it would be not flying it because until there's a ratified salary schedule. So we could approve the job description and wait on the actual posting of creating a vacancy.
Okay.
So
Because it is, go ahead, Trish, sorry.
do we have an amended motion to fly once the salary schedule has been?
Not yet. We're still
Okay.
discussing here.
Okay, just clarifying.
Okay,
So
so,
this says financial impact is 35,365 plus benefits.
Yeah.
So is that not what we're approving? Or is that what we're approving?
On the abstract right here, and that's what I was looking at when I asked the question,
Mhm.
was it says the financial impact is 35,365 plus benefits. And then on the back page is where it says Schedule M. So there's two different things that we've been presented.
So yeah, what you would be approving is the
We just
description.
approved two positions. Okay, so we just approved two positions at $14 an hour for somebody that has a high school diploma. And this position, we're asking for a 4-year bachelor's degree and experience and certification. And we're putting them in the same classification.
No, well, not
I-
necessarily.
If
What
I'm
you could do
incorrect, please
is,
correct me because
yeah,
I'm.
you can approve the job description and then the range, which is, and actual amount attached to the range isn't yet determined. So that was something that CSEA approved as a fit, you know, as a good placement. What that actual amount will be is something to be determined in the future. It definitely
But
is going to be over.
what is that range right now? And why does this say 35,365 plus benefits if that's a higher amount than range M?
So the 35 is an estimate, so that you know that that's an estimate plus the benefits. Because we're hoping we're going to move beyond what we have for our salary schedule because we've completely redone it. And I know, you know, this is kind of a last year's conversation because of all the work that was done, because the classified has a couple of different places where they look to find their salary. So it's not only just about attaching money to things, it's like creating positions that are in certain ranges.
Can we approve either
just kind of-
either the compensation without the range or the range without the compensation? Because there seems to be a big difference between 2267 and 14 something. And if something is
I think what Jen
This
is
is
trying
Carrie
to-
Waddy.
let me finish first. I think what Jen is trying to say here is, correct me if I'm wrong, but a year ago, I was on the negotiating committee with the CSEA. One of the things that we started was looking at the salary schedules for classified. Now, when you go to a teacher's salary, you see one page, you see all the ranges, you see all the steps, and you see the years. When you go to the classified salary schedule, how many are there, Carmi? There's something over here, something over there. We have positions at different schools where the positions are different prices. That's not uniform. And so that's what's being negotiated right now, is getting all of the classified onto one sheet, range and steps. And so that amount is not set in stone yet until that negotiation ends. Now, is that correct, Jen?
Yes, that you said it much better than I did. So there's an estimate so that we have an idea. We're not talking about a $12,000 impact, so that we have a ballpark figure. But again, yeah, it didn't land, and that's exactly what we're at.
So should we approve the position description with the compensation subject to the outcome of the negotiations?
I think yes, and I think if we, I'm thinking that if we approve the job description that has the range, then it will fall into place once they negotiate. Now, Carrie, you had your hand up earlier.
Yes. First off, I'm wondering why this is a classified position when they have to have a behavioral science, Bachelor of Arts degree. And second of all, when we're considering the salary they're being paid, does it fall under 35,000 with the benefits included, or do the benefits go on top of that?
On top of that, it's in addition to.
It's much more than $22 an hour that they're getting then.
Not in salary.
Okay.
Carm, you have comment?
So I am with, good.
It's not,
Carm,
so.
go ahead.
So based on what you have in your packet is the salary plus benefits. When you total it up, I believe the cost, even though it says plus benefits, it's actually the 35,000 plus benefits if it were to be on the M range on the current salary schedule. However, that was based on a percentage for statutory. That does not include health and welfare, which is an additional 15,000. So about $47,000 would be what that financial impact would be based on today's salary schedule.
Before it's negotiated, before the negotiation
Before
of,
negotiations. So
Okay.
to make it clear, because it says they wanted to fly it immediately. And so I'm just making it clear that what if you were to do an approval on what is actually stated on your agenda, they're going to start at $14.74 if we fly it immediately,
Yeah.
based on the current status that our salary schedules are in. So if you approve the position description tonight, then it'll say the M, and I believe the M is the intent, the range with the updated salary schedule that this position will fall within. Now, what that hourly rate will be, I'm unfortunately, I can't speak to that because it's not been finalized and the talks are still happening. So, but definitely the position description can be approved, I would think, but yeah, you might want to reread their motion, Trish, so we're all on the same page.
yeah, who made the motion and what is it, Trish?
I made the motion and I can make that a motion and just delete the part that says open the position immediately. So,
Okay,
Is that what you would like to do?
yes.
Okay.
and who was the second?
The
I
second
was.
trustee Waddy. Do you accept that amendment?
I do.
So the motion stands. The amended motion reads, approve the job description for new position behavior specialist.
Okay, is there further discussion?
Are we
I
gonna say
have a further question.
Yes, okay.
with compensation to be negotiated, or how are we gonna account for
We're
that?
not, we're leaving the part of open it immediately out. So it's my understanding this position will not be flown or filled until the salary schedule is updated.
Okay,
It is, Jim.
I don't think we should have the classification of where it falls, because I think that's incorrect. I agree with Carrie. We're asking for a bachelor's degree in behavioral science and we're asking for certification. So I don't think that it's classified correctly. I think that it needs to be, I think we need to revisit it. I do think it needs to be flown as soon as possible and this person needs to be put on staff, but I don't think that we should do it in this form.
What suggestions do you have?
I say I would take out the classification and have Jen reevaluate it and determine where it should actually fall. I would take out range M.
And by classification,
I
are
would
you
approve it
saying,
without the range.
are you saying classification, it's okay in the classified position?
No,
Or
I'm
should
saying
it-
that I think it's okay to, I think that Jen needs to reevaluate where she's putting this position on the salary schedule. I don't know if she does that or who does that, but I think that range M is not where it should be. If we're asking for a bachelor's degree in behavioral science, and then we're also asking for a national behavioral certification, $14 an hour is not going to be where we need to be.
You'll go
And
nuts if you look at our current job description and the salary schedules. You'd go, it'll blow your mind if you look at what we currently have. I mean, I know where we want to be, but we're not there. But okay, so
I don't
what?
think
okay.
Yeah,
What's the?
I don't think we
Okay.
can hire somebody and have them work with our students and not classify them correctly.
one
on the
last,
salary. You're thinking simply, when you say classified correctly, you're thinking on salary schedule.
yeah.
That's it.
Laura
I
Lee,
could support the job description and flying it, but I would want to take out range M.
If we fly it, we have to have a salary in it. So how close are we, the superintendent, in coming in that salary negotiation with the new CSEA? Is that going to take the rest of the year?
I don't think so. So I could bring it back
Hopefully
to the
not.
board. Yeah, I mean, I just can't make that prediction for sure, but we could wait. I could bring it back to the board and say, hey, well, you'll know because you'll have to ratify the CBA. So you'll know that we've triggered the new salary schedule, and then we can say, now we're ready to fly it. I think taking out that the way that it's been captured of having the job description, which which has been approved on the other side, and we worked with them to create, and definitely taking out the flying part immediately, because we can't fly with that salary. We know it's been basically calibrated with other jobs that have similar qualifications. So that's kind of as much as I can say in terms of where it's placed.
Yeah, I think the situation puts us where we are currently trying to straighten up our classified salary schedule, and then we're adding a new one before we know what that one is complicating things a lot. So, okay, Sue, I see your hand up.
it's not just a bachelor's degree in a behavioral science, master's degree preferred, 3 years of experience working with K-12 students who have behavioral challenges in school settings, qualifying for the National Behavior Analysis certification within the first 12 months. So it really does seem like the wage or salary, whatever we want to call it, is just not well aligned with the qualifications of the person we're seeking. And if we find somebody with those qualifications, we would want the salary to be acceptable to them.
Okay. So one of your suggestions, Jen, is that you would like to bring it back once that the salary thing is fleshed out?
Well, I would say at that point, then we could trigger the flying of it. I would still recommend to approve it as described and the range. And it can always be amended and updated, but it's a starting place, because right now we have nothing. We don't have this position. So the idea is to create the position. And I think that then in the hiring piece, then, there's time to look at it again. But this was, again, pretty careful. This was looked at by the teams to get a good placement in comparison with other positions. It's not attached to any specific money. So,
Okay. Who's
So if the teams are evaluating a position, and this is Kadusha. If the
Kadusha.
teams are evaluating a position and asking for a master's degree, and they're agreeing to $14 an hour, we need to do some serious.
You gotta get the 14 out of your head, because that's what our current salary schedule is, but we're saying we're not going to fly it.
That's what we would be approving, right?
you would not, well,
Well, we've got to get our
Do we
motions straight here on what we're doing, so we're all walk away with the same expectation.
Do we have other people with bachelor's and master's preferred and 3 years experience and all of what we're asking here for $14 an hour? Are there other classified employees at that?
Well, first of all, in the new salary schedule, I know everything's starting at 15 minimum wage. Now, as far as classified, I don't know. Karn, you may have a better sense. Do we have classified employees with bachelor's degrees and 3 years experience and on our staff, first of all.
Well, Carm, before you go, I think right now we can only talk about positions. So before she gets pulled into people, I know you're not going to talk about people. There aren't really.
I'm not asking for names. What I'm
No,
asking,
I know, but just the
Is there
positions, there's not
comparable?
very many that require, positions that require bachelor's degrees.
Yeah,
Carmi, can I ask you a question?
go ahead.
This is Kadisha. Okay, so I heard you say that if we approve this, it will be at the $14 start, right? That's what you said?
If it's flown tomorrow.
If it is flown
Tomorrow. Okay.
what we're asking is if you approve it, it was putting the horse before the cart. I think that's the verbiage or what you would say.
Yes.
Because I needed you guys to be clear that currently, if we were to fly this position, this is what we're looking at. So the 14, we can't even look at that anymore because that was not the intentions when this came up. We're still negotiating a new salary schedule, and it's just. But the job description itself is here, and that's what we're looking at. But yeah, we put the horse before the cart or whatever.
I did. You know, this is Carmi's cleaning up Jen's bad timing of things. But this has been coming up to the board, you know, it's been months where it's been trying to be introduced.
Okay. One of our options is we can go ahead and either vote for it and not fly it. I think that's our current motion, or we can vote it down and have it brought back when it is clear. So would you want to discuss it more or go for a vote?
I think it should be subject to CSEA negotiations.
But they've approved the way it is. And they will be they will also be approving, or they will also be negotiating the new salary schedule where this may land.
This is Carrie.
I don't know the process. Go ahead, Carrie.
Carrie's got her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I think we should go ahead with the motion and the second that we have, because it doesn't include the salary, and it just includes what we have as the description of the job. And I want to get some clarification as to whether this should fall in classified or certificated, because I could have applied for this job, and as with my qualifications of just getting out of college, and I wouldn't have been in classified, I would have been in certificated. I don't understand why it's in classified.
I don't either.
Yeah, it's the certificated, you have to have a teaching credential, administrative credential, or they did put social work there. That was not at the district level. Now, can anybody add to that for what the qualifications are to be on the certificated salary schedule? Is there more than that?
Lorelei?
Yeah. Who's
This person could take the CBEST. This is Kitcha. This person could take the CBEST and be on the certificated.
Yeah.
Not necessarily. It's job descriptions. If you hold a teaching credential, you have an administrative credential, you have, what's the other ones?
Speech.
Counselors, the counselors. And then within the last several years, they've added social workers. That's come down from somewhere above us on who can qualify for the certificated salary schedule. I'm thinking Need this brought back with more questions answered for us.
Well, and in terms of the certificated classified, if that is, the issue, we modeled this off of other classified positions around the county. That I think a school psychologist would be on the certificated, and then a speech therapist, the district nurse. It's really specific positions that are in each of the classifications.
Right.
Since this doesn't require a teaching certificate, we weren't considering putting it. It didn't look like a certificated position.
Okay,
But
so we could just go ahead and,
Are we
Go ahead,
paying people
Carrie.
below minimum wage? Because California minimum wage is $15 an hour.
That's, yes, we have been. We're trying to get our salary schedules up to current.
It's
They've
Well,
slowed
aren't
down.
we suable if we're paying below minimum?
We're not
wage?
paying below. It's 14.
But
it's
minimum
just
wage.
triggered.
Is 15.
Minimum wage is 15 now.
It's incrementally going there. I think at the 2022 is when it'll be 15. I think it's 13.
So we're gonna ask for, again, we're asking for a bachelor's degree.
And
Let's go
paying
back to
them.
this job description. I want to bring this to closure. We could talk all night here. Trish, what is our current motion?
The current motion as stated by trustee Myers reads, approve the job description for new position behavioral specialist. This was seconded by trustee Waddy.
And that does not include flying it immediately.
Correct.
and it doesn't include the wage either.
Oh.
Right?
It does include wage.
It does.
Harm.
And then on the next page.
It does not state the actual wage. It only states the range as to where it is on the salary schedule.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so it doesn't state an actual wage.
Number, not enough.
It's out on the salary schedule.
But that range M designates a $14 an hour job, right?
It'll kind of be
As
like
of today.
right. So it'd be like a placeholder. We'll just have it, and then we'll, you guys will authorize flying it once we have the contract wrapped up.
I'm not comfortable with the ambiguity of this.
It
Neither
doesn't
am I.
say it because it says it says that M and the level and whatever that what she's saying that it is a placeholder is that right now it's at this much money, but when it gets renegotiated, it'll be at a different salaries and we're not flying it right now, so it doesn't matter.
But does the
It'll be-
range,
it'll
does
be
the
a
range
different salary schedule.
require bachelor's degrees?
Let's have one person talk at a time here. Now that range does lock into whatever range M does come up to be, which is ambiguous right now. That's correct.
And does range M require bachelor's degrees and 3 years experience as minimum qualifications?
There aren't qualifications tied to ranges. They're tied to positions. And then some jobs will be the only one in that range, and some jobs, there's multiple, different jobs that are similar in qualifications that will be on a range.
Okay, let's, I'm going to call for the vote. Trish, could you,
Yes,
Do
it
the
looks
roll.
like we lost trustee Myers momentarily.
I'll go look.
Okay, thank you.
so we
Trustee
don't have a
Waddy.
quorum? We don't have a quorum. There's just 3 of us.
We
Four
have,
of you.
we have 4. We do have a quorum. We have trustee Waddy, trustee Brissell, trustee Colgrove, trustee George.
Oh, I can't count. It's too late.
It's getting late. We can wait. Carmi just went
Okay,
to go check.
let's go forward. Let's go forward with the vote.
Okay.
She's coming in right now and she's gonna sit at my desk, so.
Okay. Trustee Waddy,
Aye.
trustee George,
No,
I'm voting.
trustee Myers, trustee Colgrove,
No, Dow.
let's see, trustee Bursell.
No,
so we'll bring it back with more clarification at a future meeting.
So what was the final count?
The final count was 3-2
Did
Against?
not pass.
against. Yeah, not passed. The motion failed.
It did not pass.
I have I have a voting question when there's less than all 7 trustees, but I can talk to Ann about numbers and things.
What's that?
No, I was just wondering about, I have just a procedural question when it's not the full board.
We need 4 to make a quorum.
4, right,
Mhm.
okay, okay. So 3-2 would not pass either,
No,
right, okay. That's, I thought it had to be the majority.
no.
votes.
We have to have 4 no matter if we,
No matter what.
like, if we only have 4 members there, we have to have all 4 in order to pass anything.
Anyway, it wasn't 3-2, it was 2-3. It was 2,
I
2, 4, and 3 against.
correct. I said it back.
Right.
Okay. Then I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn. This is Bursell.
I make the adjourn.
Who seconded? Sue moved. Who
I'll
seconded?
second it.
Name, if you could say your names, it'd be easy. Caduceus,
Who?
second, okay.
Yeah.
I'll call, trustee George,
Yes,
trustee Waddy,
Yes.
trustee Bursell,
Yes.
trustee Colgrove,
Yeah.
trustee Myers. Was that yes? Okay. Meeting adjourned at 9:38 PM. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Can I ask